This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, our very special edition, Freedom of Speech Under Attack in America. Our very special guest, Deborah Weiss. She is a human rights lawyer, an expert on the subject of free speech and terrorism-related issues. She is the author of the book, The Organization of Islamic Cooperation Jihad on Free Speech. She's a contributor at frontpagemag.com, and you can visit her website at vigilancenow.org. Deborah Weiss, you are doing a lot.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, Jamie.
Deborah, what an honor and a privilege to have you on the Glazov Gang. As I said in the introduction, you're an expert on the subject of free speech and how it's under attack in America. Let us begin, just in general, Deborah, let's begin with you telling us why free speech is crucial and how our First Amendment is unique.
Yes, thank you for asking that, Jamie. A lot of people really don't understand the importance of freedom of speech. It's not just about trying to protect bigoted speech or let's all be nice to each other, but free speech is a foundational right, and it's also what we call an enabling right, meaning that other rights are dependent on it. For example, without free speech, you can't have political dissonance. Without free speech, you can't have religious freedom. You can't have effective national security policy. So free speech is not really on par with other rights or other freedoms, but it's an underpinning of democracy itself. So it's very important.
Deborah, we are now, as a culture and society, as a government, we are self-censoring ourselves to please and to submit to Islamic blasphemy laws. Am I correct?
Sure. There's a push originating from Islamist groups to stifle all speech that sheds Islam in a negative light. The two main umbrella organizations that are behind this push are the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is 56 UN member states, plus the Palestinian Authority, Muslim majority states, and they constitute the largest voting bloc in the UN and the largest Islamic organization in the world. And they are pushing to have the equivalent of Islamic blasphemy laws in the West. The Muslim Brotherhood front groups, which has many affiliates, there are many affiliate Muslim Brotherhood front groups, are pushing for the same thing, but in a different venue. They do it at the grassroots level. They tend to infiltrate government, interfaith dialogues, societal institutions. They're really a grassroots push, whereas the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has the same agenda but operates in the UN and in international consensus building and multilateral relationships and that kind of thing. But in the end, what they want is the equivalent of Islamic blasphemy laws. And they can't come here and say that's what they want because everybody would laugh at them. So what they do is they manipulate language, and they use language that we already have in our system, and they twist the meaning around and to use it toward their own ends. For example, they'll say it's defamation of Islam. And we have defamation laws, so for a long time we thought, oh, that's okay, we have defamation laws, only to find out that what they mean by it and what we mean by it is something different. And what they're doing now is they're using hate speech. Hate speech is the phrase, or Islamophobia, which people wrongly assume means bigotry. It might mean that to us, but that's not what it means when they use it.
Thank you, Deborah. Tell us about Resolution 1618 at the UN, how Hillary Clinton wanted to cooperate with this, how she wants to help push it on the United States.
Well, I have to first give you the background of Resolution 1618. Prior to that resolution, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or the OIC, was getting passed in the UN resolutions that were called Combating Defamation of Religions. And what those were resolutions to give Islam, which is a religion or an idea, protection from criticism, which is very different than what we have here in America, which is defamation against people. Here, you can defame a person or a group of people. You cannot defame a political idea or a policy or a religion. On those matters, we have free speech. When the West finally caught on to the fact that these resolutions have potentially dire consequences for freedom of speech, Hillary Clinton asked the OIC to draft an alternative resolution to address their concerns about so-called Islamophobia, and that would retain freedom of expression. And the resolution they produced is called Resolution 1618 to combat intolerance based on religion or belief. America and a lot of Western countries, as well as Christian organizations, signed on to this resolution because we believed that they were shifting from protecting an idea or religion from criticism to protecting religious minorities from violence and discrimination. As it turned out, though, they were master manipulators at twisting language around. So they found other phrases in the text itself, which they, in their interpretation, still turned out to be that they want to protect Islam from defamation. So even though the resolution no longer had the word defamation, it seems not to matter what the language is, because if it's not one phrase, it's another. They're master manipulators at twisting language around, and it's very clear that their goal is to criminalize, ultimately, not just outlaw civilly, but to criminalize all criticism of Islam, even if it's true. And I would argue especially if it's true. And may I tell you why they want to do this? It's
Absolutely, go ahead.
yeah, two reasons that they want to do this. The first is it forces infidels to submit to Islamic blasphemy laws, right? I mean, if you're a Muslim and it's against your religion to draw a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, okay, nobody's making you. But why should we, as Jews and Christians and atheists, have to comply with that rule? So that's one. But the other reason is it creates a safe space for jihadists, both violent and stealth, to come up with their plans to subvert the West, and without us being able to talk about it. Because if even acknowledging the existence of Islamic terrorism or Islamic persecution of religious minorities is, quote, defamation, then, and we can't talk about it, then it really hinders our ability to come up with a strategy to defeat it. So the main point to get with all of this is that Islam is singled out for special protections, and that even though they appear as speech-stifling measures, at their core, what they really are is thought-stopping measures.
Thank you, Deborah. Really scary stuff, especially knowing that Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration, in terms of the timeline at different points, was completely supportive of this and continues to be supportive of this. Deborah, we're running out of time. Very briefly, please, if you can, but we got to get to it. You're an expert on this. Another scary thing, very scary. The Democrats introducing the House Resolution 569. Tell us about it.
House Resolution 569 to condemn anti-Muslim rhetoric hasn't really been in the news, but it's very important. It originally had 73 co-sponsors, and as of today, it has 131 co-sponsors in Congress. Mind you, every single co-sponsor of this resolution is a Democrat. There is no Republican support, and there are only 188 Democrats in Congress. So far, 131 out of 188 and climbing is supporting this resolution. The resolution is really violates the spirit of the First Amendment, even though it doesn't criminalize free speech, because it can't right now. We have the First Amendment. They cannot criminalize it. However, it violates the spirit of the First Amendment by shaming it, by condemning it. It conflates violence with speech. It singles out Muslims for special preferential treatment. It tries to create a right not to be offended. And again, in what I think is a purposeful misunderstanding of words, it cloaks it in the language of civil rights. There is no civil right not to be offended. The resolution implies that, quote, hate speech against Islam or Muslims impinges on their right to practice their religion, which is completely false. And it actually goes so far as to express condolences to the victims of anti-Muslim rhetoric. And this bill was submitted only 2 weeks after the San Bernardino terrorist attacks. I'd like to know where the bill is to extend condolences to the victims of Islamic terrorism, which most of these co-sponsors are denying even exists. Oh, I would like to add that now with the death of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia, this is extremely important, because even though we have free speech now in our First Amendment, as you know, the court is often divided. And however the court interprets an amendment or anything in the Constitution will be the law of the land, even if they're wrong. All it would take is 5 Supreme Court justices to say that the First Amendment does not protect so-called hate speech, and then that would be the law of the land, even if their interpretation is wrong. So it's really critical that people pay attention to these issues and contact their representatives. And in my view, they should have a litmus test. If you don't believe in free speech, we're not voting for you.
Absolutely, Deborah. Very scary times. Briefly, please, here, because we can't leave without discussing this. It's incredible how the word Islamophobia is used as though it's a bad thing, slandering truth tellers, and yet nobody discusses this. Can you just very briefly speak about Islamophobia?
Sure. First of all, I will say that all of this could not be happening without the backdrop of political correctness and multiculturalism. It's the incorrect idea that all values, cultures, religions are equal. Why? Like Nazism and freedom and communism, it's all the same. They're all equal in value? I don't think so. So when you have that presumption, that's one problem. And the other problem is in the West, people don't really explore what the language means. We assume that Islamophobia is bigotry akin to racism or sexism. However, Muslim Brotherhood front groups and the OIC do not apply it that way. They extend it to anybody who says anything, as I said, that's negative, even if it's true, about Islamic terrorism, Islamic persecution of religious minorities, and human rights violations committed in the name of Islam. So if you want to raise awareness of any of those issues and try to do something about it, then you are an Islamophobe. And people have to really understand how name-calling and smear campaigns are being used to shut people up on issues of great importance, including human rights and freedom itself. So we're really in a war of ideas. It's Islamic supremacism versus freedom, and the frontline battle is on free speech. If we surrender on that battle, all the other freedoms are going to fall not shortly behind.
Deborah Weiss, thank you so much for coming on the Glazov Gang, and thank you for everything that you're doing to protect free speech in America and in the West, and telling the truth about it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And our audience, make sure that you are following Deborah Weiss and get her book, The Organization of Islamic Cooperation Jihad on Free Speech. Visit her website at vigilancenow.org. And thank you for joining the Glazov Gang tonight. We'll see you on the next edition. Good night.